Taehyung had always believed that some silences were harmless. That night taught him how wrong he was. The hotel suite was supposed to feel safe, private, a quiet pocket of warmth carved out after a long shoot, far from cameras, staff, and the constant pressure of being watched. The lights were dimmed, candles flickered along the counter, and old songs played softly in the background, songs from their trainee days, back when dreams were bigger than fear. Taehyung sat slightly apart from the others, a habit he'd picked up without realizing. He watched more than he spoke, always had. Jin was teasing Namjoon about his stiff dancing, Yoongi chuckled into his glass, and Hosok's laughter filled the room like sunlight. For a moment, everything felt normal. Too normal. Then Taehyung noticed it. The way Jungkook's hand lingered just a second too long near Jimin's shoulder. The way Jimin leaned in without thinking, like gravity had already decided for him. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But Taehyung had known these boys for more than half his life. And once you see something like that, you can't unsee it. Something tight formed in his chest. Not anger. Not yet. It was recognition. A pattern snapping into place after years of scattered moments, late-night disappearances, awkward pauses, looks exchanged when they thought no one was watching. The words left Taehyung's mouth before he could stop them. "You were never just his friend, were you?" The room froze. Laughter died mid-breath. Drinks hovered in the air. Even the music felt too loud all of a sudden. Jungkook's hand snapped back as if burned. Jimin inhaled sharply, eyes darting around the room searching for something, an escape maybe, or forgiveness. Taehyung felt his heart hammering, but he didn't look away. Not now, not after all this time. Hosok was the first to move, setting his drink down carefully, the soft clink echoing far louder than it should have. Just minutes ago, the suite had been full of celebration. Now it felt like standing in the middle of a storm that hadn't broken yet. Taehyung stood slowly. His legs felt heavy, but his voice didn't waver. "I've seen the way you look at each other," he said, eyes fixed on Jimin. "I've seen it for years, but tonight you slipped." Jimin opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't sound like another lie. And Taehyung realized with a sharp ache that this wasn't just about what they'd hidden. It was about how long they'd let him believe everything was fine. Namjoon stepped forward, palms raised slightly, calm but cautious. "T, let's not do this now. We're all exhausted. We can talk later." "No," Taehyung snapped, the words sharper than he intended. "Don't protect them, not when we've all been made fools." Yoongi set his glass aside, voice low and steady. "This doesn't have to be a war. Whatever it is, it's between them." "Is it?" Jin cut in, his tone unexpectedly firm. "Because if we're being honest tonight, let's actually be honest. This affects all of us." The words hit Taehyung hard because they echoed exactly what he felt, but hadn't been able to name. The secrecy, the tension, the sudden disappearances, the way the atmosphere had shifted over the years, subtle but undeniable. They hadn't imagined it, and neither had the fans. Hosok's smile had faded now, cracks forming around his eyes. "So it's real?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. "It's really real?" Jungkook finally spoke. "Yes." Just one word, but it landed like an explosion. The room went deathly still again. Taehyung felt something inside him fracture, not completely, but enough to hurt. Jungkook didn't try to soften it. He didn't need to. The truth was already out, raw and unprotected. "We didn't plan to hide it forever," Jimin said softly. "We just didn't know how to tell you, or if we even could." "You should have trusted us," Taehyung muttered. This time, the heartbreak in his voice was louder than the anger. He hadn't realized how much he'd needed that trust until it was gone. "I wanted to," Jungkook said, his voice tight. "But I couldn't lose this. I couldn't risk breaking this family." Taehyung laughed once, bitter and short. "You didn't think hiding it from us would do that anyway." Namjoon ran a hand down his face, exhaustion written deep into his features. You were never going to lose us over love, but silence, lies, that's what breaks things. The night unraveled after that. Conversations overlapped, emotions spilled, memories resurfaced. Taehyung listened more than he spoke, but every word cut deeper than the last. He wasn't watching the group fall apart. He was watching it reshape itself under the weight of a truth that should have come out long ago. At one point, Yoongi stood and said quietly, "Love isn't the enemy, but secrets can rot even the strongest bonds." That was when Jimin finally broke, sinking down against the sofa, tears slipping silently down his face. Jungkook knelt beside him, head bowed, guilt heavy in every line of his body. Taehyung looked away. Not because he didn't care, but because caring hurt too much. The truth hadn't come out as a careful conversation or a planned confession. It had erupted, and yet beneath the pain there was something else. Relief. The worst had happened. The secret was gone. But the damage was real. Later, as the candles burned low and the storm outside quieted, the seven of them sat in a loose circle. No one spoke for a long time. Taehyung pulled his hood up, AirPods in his ears without music playing, trying to shield himself from the weight in the room. He stayed, even when part of him wanted to disappear. Because no matter how much it hurt, this was still his family. And that night everything changed. Morning arrived without permission. Taehyung hadn't slept, not really. He had stayed curled into the corner of the suite, hood pulled low, AirPods still in his ears long after the others had gone quiet. No music played. He didn't want noise. Noise made it easier to pretend. Silence forced him to think. The light creeping through the curtains felt intrusive, like it was exposing something that should have stayed hidden. The room looked different in daylight. Less dramatic, less forgiving. Empty glasses sat abandoned on the counter. Candles had melted into misshapen pools of wax, evidence of a night that couldn't be undone. Across the room, Jungkook sat on the edge of the couch beside Jimin. Their fingers were loosely intertwined, not hidden, not dramatic, just there. That alone made something in Taehyung's chest tighten. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't judgment. It was the realization that this had been real for a long time, real enough to risk everything. Jimin's eyes were swollen, his posture folded inward like he'd shrunk overnight. Jungkook hadn't moved far from him once, protective, careful, the way Taehyung used to be when Jimin cried over things he wouldn't tell anyone else. That memory hurt more than he expected. Namjoon sat at the table, hands laced, staring at nothing. Yoongi poured himself coffee in the kitchenette, moving with the quiet steadiness that always meant he was thinking deeply. Hoseok leaned against the window, forehead pressed to the glass, watching the city wake up as if answers might be written somewhere out there. Jin was the first to speak. "Well," he said, stretching his arms with forced lightness, "I guess we're all awake now." No one laughed. Taehyung didn't lift his head. He wasn't ready to look at them. Not yet. Jimin finally broke the silence, his voice barely audible. "Are you okay?" The question wasn't meant for the room. Taehyung knew exactly who it was for. Jungkook answered before he could stop himself. "That's supposed to be my line." Jimin let out a weak, humorless breath. "I don't think anyone's okay." Taehyung clenched his jaw. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words felt stuck behind a wall he hadn't known he'd built. "What if this changes everything?" Jimin whispered. Taehyung almost laughed at that, almost. "It already has." But he didn't say it. Namjoon finally spoke, voice calm but heavy. "You don't need to defend love, but you do need to take responsibility for your choices." Taehyung closed his eyes. There it was, the part no one wanted to say out loud. This wasn't about who they loved, it was about who they trusted. "We didn't think you'd understand," Jungkook said quietly. That did it. Taehyung stood so suddenly the chair scraped against the floor. The sound cut through the room like a crack of thunder. You didn't think I'd understand. His voice was steady, which scared him more than if it had shaken. You let me believe I was your closest friend. Jungkook turned toward him, eyes wide, guilt written all over his face. T. No, Taehyung interrupted. Let me finish. The room stilled. Do you know how many times I thought something was wrong with you? Taehyung continued, his gaze locked on Jimin now. How many nights I almost cried because I thought you were going through something alone. I thought I wasn't doing enough. I thought I was failing you. Jimin's breath hitched. I wasn't trying to hurt you, he whispered. But you did, Taehyung said just as softly. You didn't just hide this from me. You made me feel like I didn't matter. The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Jungkook stepped forward instinctively. That's not true. You let me believe it was, Taehyung replied, and that matters. No one argued. Jin exhaled slowly. Okay, this isn't going anywhere if we just bleed on each other. Yoongi nodded. He's right, this needs time, not answers, time. Time, the thing they'd all been stealing from each other. Later that afternoon, they were ushered into a private conference room. Managers, publicists, lawyers. The tone shifted from emotional to clinical, which somehow made everything worse. Questions came fast. Plans were discussed. Risks were calculated. Taehyung sat back in his chair, arms crossed, watching Jungkook and Jimin hold their ground. We're in love, Jungkook said plainly. And we're not ashamed, Jimin added. Taehyung looked away. Not because he disagreed, but because he didn't trust himself to look without breaking. When it was over, they rode the elevator back up in silence. For the first time since the truth came out, Taehyung stood alone at the back, separated by nothing but invisible distance. Back in the suite, everyone scattered without a word. Some went to their rooms, some sat quietly. Taehyung retreated to the corner again, pulling his hood up like armor. He told himself he was angry. But beneath that was something sharper, grief. That night he stared out at the city lights, remembering the years before fame complicated everything. Dorm rooms, shared beds, promises whispered in the dark about never letting success change who they were. It had changed them anyway. A knock came softly at the door. Taehyung didn't turn. Jimin's voice said from the other side, "Can I come in?" Taehyung closed his eyes. "Not now," he replied. There was a pause, then footsteps retreating. He hated himself for the relief he felt. Because part of him wasn't ready to forgive, and another part was terrified of what would happen when he finally did. That night, Taehyung realized something he'd never admitted before. Love wasn't what scared him. Losing the place he thought he had in their lives was. And he didn't know yet how to ask for it back. The distance didn't announce itself, it simply settled in. Taehyung felt it in the small things first, in the way conversations stopped when he entered the room, in the careful glances thrown his way like everyone was measuring their words before letting them land. No one avoided him outright. That would have been easier. Instead, they hovered, concerned, cautious, unsure. He hated that more than anger. Rehearsals resumed 2 days later. The schedule didn't pause for feelings. Music still needed to be perfected. Choreography still demanded precision. Cameras still waited. Taehyung showed up early, as he always did, stretching quietly in the corner while the mirrors reflected a version of himself that felt slightly unfamiliar. Jungkook arrived with Jimin not long after. They didn't touch. Not here. Not where habits still mattered. But Taehyung saw the way Jungkook angled his body toward Jimin, protective without meaning to be. Saw the way Jimin's eyes searched for Jungkook's approval even while counting steps. Once that role had been his. The thought sliced through him, sharp and sudden. Music filled the room. Bodies moved. Muscle memory took over. Taehyung danced like he always had, controlled, expressive, precise. On the outside, nothing was wrong. On the inside, every beat felt like it landed a fraction too late. During a break, Hosok plopped down beside him, towel draped around his neck. "You good?" Taehyung nodded without looking up. Hosok studied him for a second longer, then sighed. "You don't have to be okay just because you're quiet." Taehyung almost smiled. "Almost, I know." But knowing didn't change the weight in his chest. Later, Namjoon pulled him aside near the window. The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass, bright and indifferent. "You don't owe anyone forgiveness on a timeline," Namjoon said gently. "Just don't disappear on us." Taehyung met his gaze. "I'm still here." "I know," Namjoon replied. "I just want to make sure you stay." That night, Taehyung stayed awake again. The suite felt too large, too hollow. He replayed moments he'd brushed aside for years. Jimin laughing too softly at Jungkook's jokes, Jungkook's eyes following Jimin across crowded rooms, the way their energy shifted when they thought no one was watching. How had he missed it? No, that wasn't the right question. Why hadn't they trusted him with it? The next morning, Taehyung found Jungkook alone in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug gone cold. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched, heavy but different than before, less explosive, more fragile. "I didn't mean to replace you," Jungkook said finally, voice low. Taehyung stiffened. "I didn't say you did." "But you feel it," Jungkook continued. "I can see it." Taehyung swallowed. "I feel left out, like I was the last to know something everyone else could already sense." Jungkook nodded slowly. "That's fair." Fair, the word felt small compared to the damage, but it mattered that Jungkook didn't argue. "I should have told you," Jungkook added, "a long time ago." "Yes," Taehyung said, "you should have." They stood there, two people who loved the same family, trying to find their footing again. A week passed, then another. The world outside reacted louder than Taehyung expected. Headlines, speculation, endless analysis. Fans divided, then debated, then defended. Taehyung watched it all from a distance, scrolling late at night when he couldn't sleep. He didn't read the comments about himself. He didn't want to know what role the world had decided he played in someone else's story. On a quiet evening, Jin knocked on his door with takeout and that familiar half-smile. "You eating or just surviving on caffeine and spite?" Taehyung huffed a laugh despite himself. "Both." They ate on the floor like old times, backs against the bed. Jin didn't push, didn't pry, just sat there present. Sometimes that was the most generous thing someone could offer. "You know," Jin said after a while, "families don't break when secrets come out. They break when people leave." Taehyung stared at his food. "I'm not leaving." "I know," Jin replied, "but make sure they know too." The opportunity came sooner than he expected. It was late. The others were scattered around the suite, half watching something on TV, half lost in their own thoughts. Jimin sat cross-legged on the rug, fiddling with the edge of a pillow. Jungkook hovered nearby, trying not to hover. Taehyung took a breath. "Jimin," he said quietly. Jimin looked up, eyes wide with the kind of caution that hurt to see. "Yeah." "I don't hate you," Taehyung said. The words felt raw but necessary. "I was hurt, I still am, but I don't hate you." Jimin's shoulders sagged, relief flooding his face. "I miss you," he whispered. Taehyung nodded. "I miss us too." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a door cracked open instead of slammed shut. Later, alone on the balcony, Taehyung watched the city breathe below him. He thought about how love could change shape without asking permission. How people could hurt each other without meaning to. How trust, once broken, didn't shatter, it frayed. And frayed things could be mended, slowly, carefully. He wasn't ready to pretend everything was fine, but he was ready to stop pretending he didn't care. The conversation Taehyung had been avoiding finally found him. It didn't happen in a dramatic moment. No raised voices, no audience, just a quiet hallway late at night, the hum of the air conditioner filling the space between breaths. Taehyung was on his way back to his room when he saw Jimin sitting on the floor outside it, knees pulled to his chest, head bowed like he'd been waiting for courage to catch up with him. Taehyung stopped. For a second he considered turning around. Old instincts told him distance was safer, but something in Jimin's posture, small, tired, stripped of performance, kept his feet planted. "Hey," Taehyung said. Jimin looked up slowly. His eyes were red but steady. "I didn't know where else to sit." Taehyung exhaled. "You could have knocked." "I didn't want to trap you," Jimin replied, honest, painfully so. Taehyung leaned against the wall, arms folded. "Say what you came to say." Jimin nodded, swallowing. "I owe you the truth, not the explanation you already heard, the real one." Taehyung didn't interrupt. "I didn't tell you because I was afraid," Jimin continued. "Not of you, of losing the way you saw me. You were the one who always believed in me when I didn't. I didn't want that to change." Taehyung felt the words hit somewhere deep. "You let it change anyway." "I know," Jimin whispered, "and that's on me." Silence stretched between them, but it wasn't hostile. It was heavy with things that had never been said out loud. "You know what hurts the most," Taehyung said finally. "It's not that you love him, it's that I thought I knew everything about you, and I didn't." Jimin nodded, tears slipping free. "I never wanted to make you feel replaceable." Taehyung looked away, jaw tight. "I never wanted to feel that way." They stood there, two people who had grown up side by side, now standing on opposite edges of something fragile. "I don't expect forgiveness," Jimin said. "I just don't want to lose you completely." Taehyung closed his eyes. That was the truth, wasn't it? He could stay angry, stay distant, protect himself with silence, but the cost would be losing something he still valued deeply. "I'm not gone," Taehyung said quietly. "I'm just learning how to stand here without hurting." Jimin nodded, accepting the boundary without pushing it. "That's enough for now." The next few days felt different, not lighter, not easier, but clearer. Taehyung stopped avoiding rooms Jungkook and Jimin were in. He didn't force conversation either. He just existed. Present. Real. The air between them shifted from sharp to cautious, like hands learning how to touch something broken without cutting themselves. During rehearsals, Taehyung noticed Jungkook watching him when he thought no one was looking. Not with guilt this time, but with something closer to gratitude. One evening, Jungkook approached him after practice, voice low. "Thank you for not walking away." Taehyung shrugged. "I thought about it." "I know," Jungkook said. "That's why it means something." They didn't hug. They didn't resolve everything. They just stood there, acknowledging the space between them instead of pretending it wasn't there. The company released a brief statement days later, carefully worded, neutral, supportive without spectacle. The internet reacted the way it always did, too fast, too loud, too divided. Taehyung stayed off social media. He let the noise pass without letting it decide how he felt. What mattered was inside the group. One night they ended up on the rooftop garden, the city spread out beneath them like a living thing. The wind was gentle, cool against their skin. No cameras, no staff, just the seven of them, sitting in a loose circle like they used to when they were younger and didn't know how complicated life could get. "So," Jin said eventually, breaking the quiet, "what does normal even look like now?" Yoongi smirked, overrated. Hoseok laughed softly, and the sound eased something in Taehyung's chest. Namjoon leaned forward. "Normal isn't the goal, honest is." Taehyung watched Jungkook and Jimin exchange a glance, not secretive this time, just shared. For the first time since that night, it didn't make his stomach twist. "I'm not okay yet," Taehyung said suddenly. All eyes turned to him, he didn't flinch. "But I'm still here and I'm not going anywhere." No one rushed him, no one demanded more. That was the difference now. Later, as they stood to leave, Jimin lingered beside him. "Thank you," he said quietly. Taehyung met his gaze. "Don't waste it." Jimin nodded. understanding exactly what that meant. Back in his room, Taehyung sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. He realized something then that surprised him. He wasn't angry all the time anymore. The hurt was still there. The trust still needed rebuilding. But beneath it all, there was something steady: choice. He was choosing to stay, choosing to feel, choosing not to let one truth erase years of love. Healing, he knew, wouldn't come in a rush. It would arrive in fragments, in quiet conversations, in shared laughter that didn't feel forced, in days where the past didn't weigh quite as much. And for the first time since that night, Taehyung believed that might be enough to begin again. The outside world never waits for people to catch up emotionally. Taehyung learned that quickly. What had been quiet tension inside the group became loud speculation everywhere else. Articles dissected body language from years ago. Clips were slowed down, zoomed in, replayed with theories layered on top of them like facts. Fans argued. Some defended. Some demanded explanations that no one owed them. Taehyung felt the pressure not as noise, but as weight. He carried it into schedules, into rehearsals, into interviews where questions tiptoed around the truth without ever naming it. He learned how to answer without lying and without bleeding. It was a skill he hadn't known he needed. During one interview break, he sat alone in the dressing room, scrolling through messages from people who knew him before the world did. Family, old friends, short notes that said nothing about headlines and everything about him. "You're loved. Take care of your heart. We're proud of you." He locked his phone and leaned back, eyes closing. For the first time, he realized he wasn't just surviving the situation. He was quietly becoming its anchor. Backstage at a music show, Jungkook paced near the monitors, restless energy radiating off him. Jimin stood beside him, fingers nervously twisting the hem of his jacket. Taehyung watched them from a distance, recognizing the signs: fear of being misunderstood, fear of being reduced to a single story. Taehyung walked over. "Hey," he said, voice calm, "breathe." Jungkook looked at him, startled. "You okay?" Taehyung nodded. "I am." It wasn't a performance, it was true. That night on stage, Taehyung felt something shift. The crowd roared like always, but he wasn't listening for approval. He was listening inward, to his own steadiness, to the reminder that he had survived worse things than public curiosity. When Jungkook's voice cracked slightly during one note, Taehyung stepped closer without thinking. Not to save him, just to stand with him. The moment passed unnoticed by most. But inside the group, it meant everything. Later, Yoongi sat beside Taehyung on the steps leading to the stage, both of them staring at nothing in particular. "You're doing better than you think," Yoongi said. Taehyung smirked faintly. "You always say that when I'm not sure." "That's because it's usually true." Taehyung hesitated. "Does it ever stop feeling strange?" Yoongi considered it. "No, but strange doesn't mean wrong." Those words stayed with him. Weeks passed, the initial shock dulled. The world found new things to argue about. Inside the group, routines returned, altered but intact. Shared meals, late-night jokes, comfortable silences that didn't demand explanation. One evening, Taehyung found himself laughing, really laughing, at something Hoseok said. The sound surprised him. It felt lighter than he remembered. He caught Jungkook watching him from across the room, eyes soft with relief. Taehyung didn't look away. Later that night, Jungkook knocked on his door. "I just wanted to say," Jungkook began, hands shoved into his pockets, "I know I don't get to ask this, but thank you for choosing us." Taehyung studied him. "I didn't choose us out of obligation." Jungkook nodded slowly. "I chose us because this is still my home," Taehyung continued. "And I don't walk away from home just because the furniture gets rearranged." Jungkook laughed quietly, emotion flickering across his face. "That's the most you answer I've ever heard." Taehyung smiled, a real one. The final moment that solidified everything came unexpectedly. They were practicing late, the studio nearly empty. Exhaustion had stripped everyone down to their most honest versions. Music stopped. Silence settled. Namjoon looked around the room. Are we okay? No scripts, no cameras, just the truth. Taehyung spoke first. We're not perfect, we're not the same, but we're still together. One by one, heads nodded. Jimin's voice wavered when he added, I won't hide again. Jungkook reached for his hand without thinking. This time, no one looked away. Taehyung felt something close, not a wound but a chapter. He understood then that acceptance didn't mean erasing pain. It meant letting it sit beside love without letting it control the room. It meant choosing presence over pride. That night, the one that stunned BTS, would always exist, a dividing line in memory. But it wasn't the end. It was the moment everything became honest. Time didn't heal things on its own. What it did was create space, space for choices, for effort, for intention. Taehyung learned that as the weeks folded into each other. The initial shock had faded, but the consequences lingered in subtle ways, in how carefully everyone checked in with one another, in how jokes sometimes paused before landing, in how silence, once comfortable, now carried questions. Taehyung didn't resent it anymore. He understood now that this was what growth looked like when it wasn't pretty. One afternoon, during a rare break, Taehyung wandered into the smaller practice room alone. No mirrors, no cameras, just a piano in the corner and the quiet hum of the building breathing around him. He sat on the floor, back against the wall, and let his thoughts drift without trying to organize them. For years, he had defined himself by loyalty, by how deeply he felt, how fiercely he protected what he loved. Losing clarity about where he stood had shaken him more than the secret itself. Who was he, if not the one who always knew? The door creaked open softly. Taehyung didn't turn. He already knew who it was. I figured I'd find you here, Namjoon said, voice gentle. Taehyung nodded. I needed quiet. Namjoon sat beside him, not too close. You've been carrying a lot without making it obvious. Taehyung let out a slow breath. I don't want to be the reason things feel tense. You're not, Namjoon replied immediately. You're the reason they don't fall apart. That made Taehyung look over. Namjoon met his gaze, steady. Leadership isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just staying when walking away would be easier. Taehyung absorbed that in silence. Later that evening they gathered for dinner. No schedules, no staff, just food spread across the table and the kind of exhaustion that softened edges. Conversation flowed unevenly at first, then steadied. Jimin told a story about a trainee memory, exaggerating the details like he always did. Hoseok laughed too hard. Jin corrected him. Yoongi pretended not to care but smirked anyway. Taehyung found himself watching the scene, with a strange mix of nostalgia and clarity. This was still his life. At one point, Jimin caught his eye and smiled, small, grateful, careful. Taehyung returned it without thinking. It surprised both of them. After dinner, as the others drifted away, Taehyung stayed behind to help clean up. Jungkook joined him, handing him a towel. You don't have to do that, Jungkook said. I know, Taehyung replied. I want to. They worked side by side in quiet sync, a familiarity that had survived everything. Finally, Jungkook spoke. I'm scared of messing things up again. Taehyung paused, then continued wiping the table. You will. Jungkook froze. And so will I, Taehyung added calmly. That's not the problem. Jungkook looked at him, confused. The problem is pretending we won't, Taehyung finished. Just don't lie to me again. Jungkook nodded, eyes shining. I won't. That promise felt different this time, not desperate, grounded. As schedules intensified again, Taehyung noticed something else changing, himself. He wasn't monitoring every interaction anymore. He wasn't measuring laughter or proximity. The sharp edge of comparison had dulled. Acceptance, he realized, wasn't passive. It was active restraint, choosing not to reopen wounds just to check if they still hurt. During a live broadcast rehearsal, there was a moment when Jungkook instinctively reached for Jimin's hand off camera, then hesitated. Taehyung caught the movement and gave a subtle nod. It was okay. The relief on Jungkook's face was instant. That night, Taehyung stood alone again on the balcony, city lights shimmering below. He thought back to the night everything had come out, the confusion, the betrayal, the fear of being left behind. He wasn't in that place anymore. He hadn't lost himself, he had refined himself. What stunned BTS that night wasn't just the secret. It was the realization that love could exist in more than one form at the same time, and that making room for it didn't mean shrinking. Taehyung rested his arms on the railing, feeling the cool metal under his palms. He wasn't the center of the story anymore. And for the first time, that didn't feel like loss. In the end, Taehyung understood something that had taken him years to learn. Some truths don't arrive to destroy you. They arrive to rearrange you. The night that stunned BTS would always exist in memory, etched into timelines, headlines, and quiet moments no one else would ever see. But it no longer defined him by pain. It marked the moment he chose honesty over assumptions, presence over pride, and love without ownership. Taehyung no longer needed to be the one who knew everything first. He only needed to be the one who stayed real. Standing on stage months later, lights washing over him, cheers rising like waves, he glanced to his side. Jungkook was there. Jimin was there, not as secrets, not as fractures, just as people he loved, imperfect and honest. And Taehyung smiled, not for the cameras, not for the crowd, but for himself. Because he had survived the silence. He had faced the truth. And he had learned that family doesn't mean never hurting each other. It means choosing, again and again, not to walk away. That night changed everything. But what came after? That was the part Taehyung was proud of.